Fendi, like the bag. This is the I Refuse podcast. I'm back. Oh, this is the season finale, season 4 of the I Refuse podcast. Once again, I was minding my African American business. Hey, I'm Mr. Fox, the I Refuse podcast. Was walking into the living room yesterday. Happy Juneteenth, happy Pride. Saw Mr. Great was watching what I thought was a documentary about deep sea diving, about people going down to the bottom of the ocean to look at the Titanic, where it's always been for over 100 years. Turns out it was a news story. Five people, five people decided to get into what looked like a Tonka-made submarine to go deep sea diving to look at the Titanic, where it's been for over 100 years. And they have come up missing. Riddle me this. So, I have a question for the white people, out here. What's so fascinating at the bottom of the ocean? Because here's the thing. For those of us that have taken science class, they always tell us that the pressure alone at the bottom of the ocean is intense enough to kill your ass. Yeah, y'all decide every year to either go deep sea diving, literally just in rubber with a air tank on the back of your bag. Go snorkeling down to see the Titanic. Now y'all have gotten to a point to where y'all get some of y'all friends from, your gated communities to go into a submarine, go thousands of feet below sea level to go look at this ship that has looked the same the past 100 years. Like, it wasn't enough that you saw the movie, you know the shit happened. Black people don't do that. In the back of our minds, we're like, that's what the fuck y'all get for not letting black people get, on. That we feel not a lick sorry for y'all. Y'all, my common sense kicked in was like, anybody that's missing, you might as well just, especially in the sea, you might as well pack it on up. Like, any search and rescue you've started, you might as well pack it on up. Because you see when that boy jumped into the ocean off of that cruise ship a couple weeks ago, in the dead of night, white people always doing dumb shit. Search and rescue was like, yeah, we're not, you can just pack it on up. What, within a 48 hours? They were just like, yeah, we're not going to find them. The sharks got them. Now y'all decided y'all need to see the Titanic one more time this year. Like, the documentaries wasn't enough. The movie, what, what y'all be thinking? What y'all be thinking? Like, I don't have anything else to do today. I I just want to get out and do something. But y'all don't only not only do y'all go outside, but y'all decide to get into a submarine that more than likely one or two of y'all in this five friend group decides I'm going to create this submarine in my driveway. Create the submarine in my driveway and get five of my friends in there. And just we are just so fascinated by this Titanic story. We have been fascinated every year that they do a documentary about the Titanic being at the bottom of the ocean and get into the history of it. That we're going to do this during the fourth season of the pandemic. And here we are. So, my thing is this. Why? You know what I mean? Like what I saw, so of course, the news just loves, as they're reporting on something like this, having a model submarine similar to what they theorize is the actual similar to what these five people got in and decided to go thousands of feet below sea level to see this damn ship that is covered in sand, covered in animal fecal matter, covered in moss, just all kinds of crap that's at the bottom of the ocean, right? Because, it's just not enough. You just got to verify. And I looked at the model, I was like, that thing probably capsized the moment it got to the pressure I was telling y'all about. And those five people were not prepared. I'm on the I Refuse podcast talking like it's just you and me. And I need to know. I just want to know, white people, what the hell is going on? Was it the California wildfire? Was it the skies and shit? And they're saying, by the way, that there may be another round of that in the coming weeks, on top of another round of possible exposure to the vid. But I really wanted to get up on here to, out of curiosity with the white people, like, I've been noticing there's like this trend right now where y'all are just hopping into shit with people you probably barely know, going into the ocean, probably can't swim, probably didn't take a lick of a swimming class, because you are fascinated by shit. Like that lady Kim Wall, right? I was on TikTok, minding my African American business, and my timeline is constantly bombarded by white people business. So this lady, Kim Wall, right, decides she wants to get into a submarine. I guess to interview or do a documentary with this guy that I believe built the submarine. Just the two of them had no idea that she would end up dead. And my question was, as somebody that's not going to do small spaces, I'm from Baltimore, grew up on public transportation. I'm aware of the crazy in the world. But also, when you take public transportation, you're in these situations where it's you and a bunch of other people in a subway car. It's you and a bunch of people on a bus with not much protection, right? So, bus, train, you do the subway thing, you do the public transportation with some crazy people in Maryland, Baltimore, especially like off of North Avenue. So I'm curious as to what y'all's fascination with the bottom of the sea is. What y'all's fascination is with getting into these submarines that are not made by the military, that are not obviously coded and inspected right, with people you barely know. To see a ship. So another thing I noticed, and I was talking to Mr. Great about this, is a few weeks ago I was talking to him about this white guy. White guy decides to he wants to reverse aging, and he wants to try something out. So what he does is he jumps into, I believe, a submarine and or a chamber of some kind, and decides he wants to go to the bottom of the ocean for, I think, up to a month and a half. Now, of course, this guy's like a billionaire or whatever, can afford to do whatever. Um, had a team of specialists, doctors, all this other stuff beforehand. Allegedly did all this research. Gets into this thing, goes down to the bottom of the ocean, comes back all in one piece, claims that the doctors and the specialists that monitored him or, did the blood work and did all the signs and stuff off of his blood work was able to determine that his chromosomes grew back, and that his chromosomes grew back, his blood flow was greater, his heart was a lot healthier, and they were able to say, without a fact, that he was able to extend his life expectancy another 25 years. We here at the I Refuse podcast call bullshit. Because first of all, doctors will take your money and tell you any kind of fucking thing to take your money. This is coming from a guy that goes to the doctor and has to pay the office just to sit in the damn lobby. So, I'm not saying doctors are scammers, but they can play the game if they want to. Listen, if I'm a doctor and I'm hired along with like 5 or 10 other motherfuckers to be a panel of specialists, to be a part of a personal group of doctors, and, give him as much advice going into this, all the dangers. He comes back after a month and a half at the bottom of the ocean. I can feel smoke up his ass and be like, yeah, the chromosomes have grown back. The nails are great. And, your heart's pumping a lot. To get a check for about 4, 5, 6 figures, like, I want to know where in science did they say, oh, well, that is... Like, could you imagine? Because, for the longest time, they had us convinced, oh, if you can live in space, we can live on other planets. But they never said, yeah, living at the bottom of the ocean in a chamber that you more than likely commissioned and paid for, living at the bottom of the ocean in this chamber for a month and a half, that, as wild as it may seem, may actually work. First of all, no, not everybody's a billionaire, and not everybody's going to do that shit. But believe me when I tell you, somebody out in Okie Wisconsin, or out out west somewhere with an internet connection and a GoFundMe. We got nothing but time in this pandemic, and people will try anything. People try anything. So I'm going into the summer. I'm going to take the summer off from the podcast, right? To get into this book I've been reading. I took a break from 1619 Project a couple of months ago and picked up a new book in support of a queer, asexual man that I follow on Twitter. Put out a great book. I've been trying for close to a year to get him on the podcast. Going to see if we can get that done over the summer and then come back in the fall. So once again, I was minding my African American business. The timeline down on the Bird app was ablaze. Apparently, Russell Simmons, and I'm glad the conversation has come up because we here at the I Refuse podcast have been talking about Russell Simmons, I believe, in season 2 of the podcast. Go check that out. I believe I started talking about him during the Boys Club episode. Either part 1 or part 2 or both parts. So recently, Kimora Lee Simmons, his ex-wife, went on live to share with the rest of us her experience with her ex-husband. From the comforts that he has had over in Bali. Kimora Lee Simmons has 2 children by Russell Simmons. He has, she first went on live, and then one of her daughters exposed him, the WhatsApp conversations, the screen recordings of the Zoom calls where he's literally yelling, showing all of his fake teeth, foaming at the mouth, pissed about something. I wish she'd had closed caption. So apparently Russell Simmons has allegedly been harassing them, not only Kimora Lee, but the kids, playing, up the role as somebody that is not present in his kid's life. I mean, we all know that. But you know the story, you know the script. When there's an absentee parent, the absentee parent is the one that's trying to make it seem like somebody's forbidding them from being in their kids' lives. Russell Simmons allegedly has been coming at these 3 women over money missing, money stock money that was in this company that I think he was in charge of being transferred into their accounts to pay off Kimora Lee's husband's legal fees connected to allegedly some kind of bank fraud or something. He owes people allegedly a lot of money, upwards of $2 or $3 billion. And the legal fees, upwards in the millions. Rich white people shit. Don't really pay too much mind. So here's the thing. Even with all of that, the news will report, and this is years in the making, the news will report on everything else except 2 things. That Russell Simmons allegedly has been in the crosshairs for many, many years. Allegations, assault allegations, rape allegations, uh, grooming allegations, um, dating a child allegations with models outside of Kimora Lee, allegedly, with A&R executives, with just young, and also young white women. So probably as early as 2017, 2018, I remember Mr. Fox, I Refuse podcast here, seeing a documentary later on that details some of this stuff. So I remember talking on the I Refuse podcast about the documentary with the Abstract Sagittarius, where Drew Dixon, who follows me on Twitter, goes into detail. That during her time as A&R Def Jam in the 90s, there was a situation involving Russell Simmons where he invited her to his apartment under the guise of listening to some demos. Yeah, there's some demos or some artists I want you to listen to. They get up there. They didn't get around to the demo, listening to demos. There were no demos. And before you know it, he's forcing himself on her in his bed. And there was some assault. And I believe her. I also believe her story about L.A. Reid, where, some of these men in high power positions leverage their power and their position to restrict women because they won't consummate their advances. So, Russell Simmons, I'm so glad the conversation has been coming back around lately because a lot more people should be paying attention. And a lot of people, there's still a great amount of people in the comment section on the timeline that are just like, well, I didn't hear about that. What happened? So here's a good determining factor as to guilt and innocence. And this is the oldest thing in the book. When a person who has no connection to a particular country, but moves to that country, and the country just happens to have no extradition clause or extradition law, yeah, motherfucker did that shit. And it was interesting to me a couple of years ago, actually right before the pandemic, to see that Russell Simmons had time to come to California and appear on Roast Me. I believe it was season 4, season 5, which is a show that's part of All Def on YouTube. I was like, oh, he had time to just pop up and be on YouTube. And the allegation was one of the reasons why Oprah decided not to work with him a couple years ago. And at first, that decision opened the floodgates to where people were looking at her pretty strange because while she was able to do that and she's well within her right to disassociate herself with men that have allegations of that degree surrounding them, she was still buddy-buddy with Harvey Weinstein. Um, but I find it interesting though, like with her, where it's just like she is so ready to disassociate herself from famous black men, or in this case, give a platform to lying accusers of Michael Jackson, but has no problem sharing air with Harvey Weinstein during that entire time that he was doing what he was doing. That's a whole nother conversation for something else. But here we are in 2023 where this man is yelling at his kids over Zoom or whatever, FaceTime, and coming at them kind of crazy in WhatsApp. And I have a theory. It's like the reason why you're tripping over money is because you need that money to sustain a living in Bali. Glory days of Def Jam are over. You sold your majority stake of Def Jam for a cool amount of money, but you don't get any kind of restitution or royalties from being the CEO of a record label. Whatever money you got from the sale of your stake in Def Jam, which you started in the mid 80s with Rick Rubin out of a dorm room, that's it. And nobody else is talking about any of this. And here we are in 2023. This man, the cracks are starting to show. And unfortunately, these three women, Kamorley and her two daughters, are being blasted, being attacked, being harassed um, by someone that is essentially on the run. Now, everybody wants to put up the spotlight only on, what Kamorley is doing with money that she's essentially entitled to, because a lot of people don't know that Kamorley bought Fat Farm to save it, which is interesting because at that time I thought Fat Farm was doing it up real big in the early 2000s, but Kamorley bought Fat Farm to save it. Of course, it doubled or maybe tripled in value since she purchased it back in the day. And Fat Farm was everywhere. Fat Farm was cute for a few summers, right around the same time as Iceberg. So, Kamorley having to do certain things to support her children and to keep things running in her household, I totally get it. But it's funny and it's telling as to the kind of media that we have where y'all are focusing on the wrong shit, because this woman's just trying to survive. And her and her children are under a dark cloud of a man that is powerful, is connected, and is harassing them outrageously from a different country. And y'all are not having a conversation around the fact that he met Kamorley when she was like 14, 15 years old. This dude just does not know boundaries. Um, she was modeling then, and that's a whole nother conversation about models where you have young models as young as middle school age around grown ass adults with little to no parental supervision, or if there is a legal guardian around, puts their whole faith into these adults. And because the child is the breadwinner as the model, there are a lot of passes given. They got to go to red carpet parties, all this other shit around grown ass people, and shit happens. Me giving my theory. So glad from an I Refuse podcast standpoint that we're revisiting the Russell Simmons stuff. Like there needs to be further investigation to all this, and I think unfortunately though he's going to be protected because he's inspired a lot of people. You really telling yourself when you go to another country and you've been over there almost 6 years. Like, why are you running? And everybody else that you've had a professional relationship with, move on about life as if they don't know shit. It's 2023. People are jumping in home economics projects with 4 or 5 of their friends going to the bottom of the ocean. We have men that are in their 60s that try as they might, as hard as they can, to try to evade shit. There's no running from this. Like, all the dirty shit comes out in the wash. And I think the sun is starting to set on Russell Simmons. And Twitter is a beast. Like, no amount of impact and reverence and legacy is going to outdo the damage you've done to young women. Like, my heart goes out to Kimora Lee and her 2 kids. Like, that young woman cannot catch a break. You know, very beautiful woman, has been connected to some pretty gorgeous men and has worked hard as a model and a brand, and just ends up with like men that ain't shit. And there's really no other way to look at this than a woman that is being harassed and by a man that is fucked up in the head, and they're saying that he could have dementia. That could also play into how he's acting the way that he is. Like, you're not present in your kid's life. You're not contributing in any way. And the more you talk while you're on the run, allegedly, eventually shit's going to slip out from your own mouth. And I'm sure within the next, with the coming weeks, more stuff will come out. And if they make enough smoke, the authorities will get involved. Like, I wouldn't be surprised if this time next year, it'll be the state versus Russell Simmons, like on Cosby levels. Y'all be sure to continue to check out the I Refuse podcast. This is on 8 streaming platforms. The link is in the Twitter profile at I Refuse Podcast. Follow that Linktree link to the other platforms that this podcast is on and to the YouTube of where this video is. And I will catch you guys in the spring. In the meantime, in addition to the I Refuse Podcast, check out the I Refuse Podcast After Dark and The Usual Suspects, which I'll continue to record for that through the summer. The Usual Suspects with myself and the Abstract Sagittarius, the I Refuse Podcast After Dark, and of course, the I Refuse Podcast, which is in its 4th season. And we will catch you guys later.